Welcome to the show. I'm Portland Helmich. Most of us trust our doctors, and our trust is rewarded. When we're sick, they help us get better. When we have a strange ache or pain, they get to the bottom of it. But approximately 1/3 of the time, the well-trained professionals we trust can't tell us what's wrong with us. So what was it, Patricia, that helped you get to the bottom of it?
A friend of mine suggested going to see an iridologist, and when I did, they had told me I had gallbladder congestion.
An iridologist, and I can imagine viewers watching saying, what did she see? Who did she see? An iridologist? What's that? So let's find out a little bit more about iridology first. We're joined by Dr. David J. Pesek, a clinical nutritionist and psychotherapist. He's also the president of the International College of Iridology. Thanks so much for being here, Dr. Pesek.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
So iridology, the study of the iris, or the colored portion of the eye.
Exactly.
So what do iridologists see in the eye?
What we're looking at with the iris, the colored portion, as you said, is the fiber structure of the iris. And when we look at it from a distance like this, we just see a color, brown, blue. But when we look closely under magnification, there's little tiny fibers or connective tissue that comprises the iris. And the shape of those little fibers and how they make a pattern in the iris tells us about a person's health genetically, what they were born with, what they inherited from their parents, their grandparents, even their great-grandparents are reflected genetically in our eyes.
So how is it that the iris contains this information?
Well, the eyes embryologically are an extension of our brain, and since our brain is connected to every cell of our body via the nervous system, it sends that information out through the eyes. And there is a reflex in the iris for every gland and organ in the body.
And though a lot of people have never even heard of it, it's actually quite ancient.
It is. It dates back in recorded history, not folklore, in recorded history, 3,000 years to Central Asia, 1000 BC.
And you're still practicing it today.
Yeah, don't I look good?
Right. But why is it that ophthalmologists don't practice iridology? I mean, that seems like an obvious match.
You know, Portland, it's true. It is an obvious match. And back at the turn of the century, the last century, meaning the 1900s, iridology in the United States was practiced by medical doctors.
Until?
Until probably the 1930s, 1940s. Those that were trained, they started to get age and they were no longer in practice. And what happened was that they were looking at the eyes and saying, you know, we see changes here where maybe surgery isn't necessary, prescription drugs are not necessary, and the political powers and economic powers that were around at the time said, shh, don't talk about those things. You're tampering with our business.
Okay, we're going to take a look at some pictures that you say reveal certain genetic constitutions, strong constitution, weak constitution. Let's take a look at the first one right now. It's a picture of an iris that you say reveals a strong constitution. Why is that?
When we look at this iris, we see no little tiny holes or separations, as we'll see in the next picture here in just a moment. But what we're looking at is what we call the trabecular or fiber density of the iris. And that is where all the little tiny threads or fibers that comprise the iris are nice and straight and close together. That's a strong, very smooth, like a silk fabric, very tightly woven.
And the next one that we're going to look at is the weak constitution, which looks completely different, but the color of the eye is also different.
The color is still in the blue family, a little bit darker. Around the pupil, we see a little bit of coloration. That's the gastric area. But if you notice all the fiber structure, it's very erratic, and there's openings and there's thickenings of the fibers. Some are bunched together, some are separated. There's light and dark areas. This is a weak genetic constitution individual.
So does iridology just tell you about someone's genetic constitution, or can you also see conditions that are happening in the body right there and then?
We can also see conditions that are happening, but it's interesting that iridology is a wonderful tool of prevention, and we can actually see these patterns in the iris of a newborn as to whether or not they're going to have strong or weak heredity in heart, liver, kidney, etc.
And you work off a very intricate chart. We're going to put that up right here. How many different checkpoints on the eye are you looking at?
When I do a total analysis, I do 140 checkpoints of a person's health. In the left iris, you'll see the L in the center of the pupil. That L is the left iris, and that represents the reflex of the left lung, the left kidney, the left breast, the left ovary, and so on. And in the right eye, correlation, right eye, right kidney, lung, ovary, and so forth.
And we have a picture that you say reveals a a particular health condition. This one is of cholesterol plaque. And why is that? We see some arrows around the perimeter of the iris.
Yes, notice that whitish gray, bluish whitish gray color that goes around the very edge of the iris. That's actually technically on the cornea, but we use it in the science of iridology, and it tells us what's happening in the arterial system, that there is plaque beginning to build up in the arterial system of this individual, which means that we should look at what's happening with their liver, stress-related, diet-related, and even emotionally related.
So, Patricia, you saw an iridologist. What did she recommend to you?
She recommended I do a colon cleanse and a gallbladder flush, and I've been fine.
Ever since?
Yep.
But iridology is it's a tool of assessment. It's not a form of treatment. So
Correct.
Her iridologist was suggesting that she do something. So do iridologists have other types of experience, like they're trained in nutrition like you are, or herbal medicine?
Exactly. Some are trained in nutrition. Some of them might even be an ophthalmologist, an optometrist, an acupuncturist, clinical nutritionist, herbalist, chiropractor, and so forth. They have modalities of treatment, and iridology is used as a tool of assessment.
But one thing I have to bring up here before we close is that you know that there really isn't any hard yet scientific evidence into this, and there have been some studies done that have shown that iridologists, when looking at various eyes, they can't tell the difference between someone with kidney problems versus someone without. So what do you say to people who would say, hey, you know, this is just in the same pool as astrology and tarot card reading?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question because it's important to be addressed. I do know that iridology is accurate, and research has been done. The research that's been done here in this country has been somewhat biased in an effort to suppress iridology. 100 years ago, medical doctors were practicing iridology. And in other countries around the world, medical doctors practice iridology freely, especially in Germany and Russia.
But you're a real believer in this.
Oh, definitely.
And why is that?
If I would have continued at the rate I was going, I would have ended up with surgery to get my gallbladder out.
You're convinced of that?
I can guarantee it.
And you actually say, and we're going to talk about this in the next segment, that the eyes reveal even more than our genetic predispositions.
They do.
They can reveal what?
Thought and emotional patterns as well. We've heard the expression, the eyes are the windows of the soul. It's true.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you so much for being here, Patricia.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome back. I'm here with iridologist Dr. David J. Pesek. And Dr. Pesek, you're going to do an abbreviated iridology analysis with me today with something that you helped to develop.
Exactly. This is called the Pesek Clinical Iriscope. And with research and design, it was developed for me and built in Australia. So would you come into my office, please, and have a seat?
Okay.
And place your chin right here. And as you said, for demonstration purposes, we're just going to photograph your right eye.
Okay.
If you would take this little obturator and cover your left, you're looking straight ahead, right into
That pink diamond.
The pink diamond, and you'll see those two lenses looking at you.
And I just stare.
Yep, you stare and you look straight ahead, and I'll get you focused. That's good. Open nice and wide. Ready? There we go. It's that easy.
So you just take the picture, and then you're able to blow it up.
And we transfer that into a computer, and we'll put it on a screen, and then that way we can see your iris much larger. I mean,
so this is it.
This is it.
So, you know, I have to say, we were talking about the strong and the weak constitution earlier. And when we were looking at the weak constitution, there were all sorts of rivulets and spider webs. And my eye looks like it has that. So do I have a weak constitution?
Be easy on yourself. It's
I'm not
that hard. Here, your constitution is medium. It's a solid constitution. What I showed you in those graphics earlier were extremes. Those were the rare exceptions, just for contrast and comparison to demonstrate. Your constitution is good.
How can you tell?
I can tell by the little dark areas in here that we call lacunas, the darker areas like here and here and here. You don't have that many of them, and they're not that deep. What I do notice is that you have a lot of energy. If you notice that right here, there's these little arcs. They're called contraction furrows, and they tell me that you have an active mind. You're always thinking. You have alternatives.
You can tell that just by looking at my eye.
I can. Even if I didn't know you and you came into my office, I knew nothing about what you did for a profession, and you sat down, I could tell you that.
That I have an active mind.
A very active mind. You have alternatives to alternatives to alternatives. If plan A doesn't work, you probably have a plan E.
That's right.
A plan Z.
That's right.
Yep.
Now,
well, the eyes don't lie. It's amazing.
What is this mark?
This little brown pigment here relates to the liver. Now, it's not in the liver reflex area, as we saw on the iris chart earlier. The liver is down here. But right here, that color, the brownish pigment, tells me it's about the liver and sugar metabolism within the liver, and you need to work on it.
And I cannot tell you how many people over the years have told me, naturopaths, herbalists, macrobiotic counselors, that I have liver congestion.
There you go.
Is that what that means?
That's what that means. And here it is in your iris. And that was in your iris as a predisposition when you were a little girl, probably age 3, 4, or 5, that pigment began to appear.
And you say that it also connects with thought and emotional patterns.
Yes, the liver, the gallbladder, the thyroid, and the parathyroid relate to issues of anger, resentment, and frustration.
I have none
Can you relate to that at all? No,
yes,
no. Okay,
yes.
I understand by your reaction. Yeah.
So let me ask you this. If I were to become less angry, let's say I work with a psychotherapist, you're a psychotherapist,
yes.
and I let some of that resentment go, would that pigment change?
The pigment over time can lessen. But think about that pigment has been in your eye for many years, you know, since you were a little girl. And so it's not going to go away overnight. Okay. It's almost like a scar, a vestige of something that would be in the past once you heal those issues of frustration, anger, and subsequent maybe resentments.
But also on a physical level, I should probably stay away from
sugars, because of the location. Which is
what I go to when I'm stressed.
And I can tell you why, is because down here, you see the pancreas area. This is a pancreas reflex. And you see that little orange area there, that little pigment.
Yes.
That relates to the pancreas. And the pancreas is a digestive organ, and it also works with insulin to regulate blood sugar.
Okay, so because that little mark is there, what does that mean?
That's a caveat that you should really avoid the sugars, especially the refined sugars.
The hardest thing.
Now, one of the things, too, that points to that is this dark, tiny, dark little spot right there is in the adrenal gland reflex.
I cannot believe you said adrenal glands, because I have been told also, I mean, I know from going to this naturopathic doctor that my adrenal glands get shot when I'm working too hard. And I've been taking this protein powder.
It makes perfect sense because genetically that little dark spot was there when you were developing in utero. And when you've come out and you're in the real world and you're functioning as an adult, the adrenal glands do not have the genetic strength to keep producing for you, to keep your energy up. So consequently, there's a tendency to want to have sugars to support your blood sugar, to raise energies rather than the natural energy that should come from the adrenal glands.
Right. And then there's this yellowish sort of ring on this side of the eye. What is that?
That represents a kidney congestion, and I would really recommend that you drink a lot more water.
And I've been told to be drinking more water. That's amazing. Yeah. So you can really see all of that.
They really do. And this relates to issues of forgiveness. The orange, the kidney congestion, and the pancreas relates to issues of grief and sadness. Now keep in mind, these might not be your direct issues that you feel grief and sadness right now because they are genetically inherited from your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents. And I always
That's a lot of baggage.
It can be. Indeed, and that's how we say it. We say challenges.
Okay.
It's inherited challenges from our ancestors. But I always like to tell people that good health is your choice.
Good.
So strong constitutions, weak constitutions, whatever you have is your gift. And then you work with that.
And Dr. Pesek, you're going to talk a little bit about the connection between our eye color and our health?
Actually, our predispositions. We have 3 basic eye colors in the world, in humans. And this one here, the brown eye, is the oldest iris color on Earth with humans. And with the brown eye,
This looks like a good one to
It's
me.
a good constitution. You're a good student. The color here tells us that they have a challenge genetically with liver, gallbladder, and blood conditions. But that doesn't mean that every person that has brown eyes has those conditions. But those are their caveats. Those are predispositions. And this is across all gene pools, no matter what.
Whether you're Caucasian, whether you're Asian
or African-American, it doesn't make a difference. It's those 3 things.
Interesting.
And then there's a blue iris.
Right.
Now, the blue iris is the next color to emerge on Earth in humans. And the blue iris tells us that the predispositions here are sensitive mucosal tissues like the genital urinary tract, kidneys, bladder, lungs, reproductive system. the blue-eyed person tends to have more sensitive reactions, allergies and things like that, with having the blue eye.
Interesting. And then the third color, everyone thinks, oh, it's going to be green. It's going to be green, but it's not. It's called biliary?
Biliary, or in common terms, it's called hazel. And the hazel eye or biliary iris is
a
genetic,
combination.
Exactly. It's a genetic mix of maybe a brown-eyed mom and a blue-eyed dad. Their child comes out and has this iris color or some gradient of this look, this appearance. And the biliary iris person needs to also pay attention to their liver, their gallbladder, and their pancreas for
so there's
digestion
a mix
and blood
because
sugar.
the liver was also with the brown eye.
Yes, and they carried that trait over into the biliary iris.
So let me ask you, when people come to you, do they ever say to you, you know, just tell me a little bit. Don't tell me everything.
Oh,
because
yes.
some of this can be a little bit scary.
They can, and some people say, don't tell me everything. If you see something really bad, don't tell me. And I say, but now that's rare, but why wouldn't you want to know? Because iridology is a very powerful tool of prevention. And if an iridologist can look into your eyes and give you the awareness as to where a disease could begin in your body,
That's a lot less costly.
much
than
less
years down the
and
line.
to prevent it and be healthy, because good health is your choice.
Well, it's very interesting. It gives me a lot to think about. I appreciate the analysis you did
you're
with
welcome.
me earlier, and
It's my
thank you
pleasure.
very much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks so much for watching. I hope you learned something new.